Okay, the hearing's reconvened and we will move to submission 31. That's from Fonterra Limited. Welcome, Mark.
Yep.
And so just sorting out between now and lunch, because you're featuring in all of that slot,
Yes.
You'll do the Fonterra submission first, and then for the next range of submissions, are you going to do them as a package or are you going to do them separately?
So Sir, I've got a joint presentation which has common themes, and then it breaks into the individual four submitters.
Okay.
So that you understand each of their individual interests as well.
Okay.
And to be fair, some of the common themes in that package of four will be actually covered in advance as part of the Fonterra presentation as well. So I won't repeat those. I'll just do it once and then tell you when I've done that.
Okay, so we've got at this stage, there's been 20 minutes allocated in terms of each submission. In terms of the Fonterra one, Leah will ring the bell at 10, so that you know then whether you want to carry on, and also leave some time for questions from the committee. For then the following submissions, more than happy to leave you a block of time in terms of that overall presentation, then we can break down, but we can work through that when we get to that.
Right. Thank you, sir. That sounds perfect.
Okay. So over to you. So this is submission 31, members, on page 104 of our agenda.
Okay, so Suzanne's going to kick off and we'll go from.
No, you need to press the button there. Fine.
Morena, Suzanne O'Rourke. I'm National Environmental Policy Manager for Fonterra, and here we're presenting our submission on Future Proof. So I'll start the presentation with an overview and then pass to Mark. So moving to the next slide. Thank you. That's great. That's what we will cover off today, and I'll cover off the preliminary comments. Thank you. Great. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Fonterra is always looking to be involved in these processes that cover both local, regional and national planning matters that are taking place. So obviously our company goes across the entire country, and I'm here representing sort of the manufacturing sites that are located within the Waikato region or within the Future Proof area. So we submitted initially in the 2021 draft Future Proof strategy. And some of the matters that were raised in that submission at the time haven't come through to this later document, so hence our appearance here. So Future Proof affects the sub-regions planning provisions, which hold statutory weight, and so we're very keen to see that those planning matters that are captured in Future Proof, which then flow through to our dairy production and operation, are addressed as part of this review. So thanks for that. I'll move on to the next slide. So just at a very high level, so we are New Zealand's largest company. We have 12,000 employees in New Zealand, and as I say, we have 28 manufacturing sites across the country. So 5 manufacturing sites within the Future Proof area. So obviously the large site up at Te Rapa, Hautapu, Te Awamutu, both within the Waipa district, and Morrinsville and Waitau within Matamata Piako. So we also have other interests within the region, obviously Campak and Crawford Street, which are sort of our main logistics hub, and then we have our offices in London Street, and a number of other interests around the region. So the RPS, sorry, I'll just finish on that last point. So the Waikato RPS identifies those as regionally significant industry, and there's a provision which is very much supported Fonterra and supported us going forward in these planning processes. It enables those sorts of activities to be recognised and provided for, and we very much value having that provision captured in that high-level policy document. So I'll hand over to Mark. Thank you.
Suzanne, so just by way of a preliminary comment, Future Proof has, as a strategy, has now become elevated in its status. So previously it was a non-statutory document and a sort of locally developed initiative. because of the MPS for urban development, it has now become as is noted on your website, as a future development strategy, which must be given effect to in subsequent planning documents. So from our perspective, this makes future-proof actually far more important, and far more important to get it right at the front end, because there's no rights of appeal. So this is really a one-stop shop to try and get in place the sort of planning provisions and high-level direction, which will then influence those key planning documents, including the RPS and the district plans that relate to the future-proof area. So as Suzanne said, we had a crack at it last time round and tried to get some provisions in there, which were not accepted because of the elevated status of the document. It becomes increasingly important that those provisions are included. And that sort of comes from bitter experience too, in terms of what's occurred in that intervening period, in terms of the sort of things, the outcomes that Fonterra has experienced. So if I take you through, Leah, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first part is in terms of the guiding principles. So essentially, I should also say by way of introduction, really, there's two key themes for Fonterra. One is adequately recognising and providing for its activities in terms of planning documents and ensuring the integrity of the planning provisions that relate to those facilities. And the second thing, which is essentially the opposite end of the same telescope, is avoiding the establishment or intensification of incompatible activities in proximity to Fonterra's activities, and therefore seeking to avoid reverse sensitivity effects. And as I'll take you through the detail of the submission, it's mealy mouth sort of policies that talk about minimising reverse sensitivity do not work. They do not achieve the desired outcome, which is to avoid reverse sensitivity effects. So going through the first point there, in terms of the guiding principles, it's our view that Fonterra's operations are not adequately recognised in terms of their regional significance. So we want that recognition that's in the RPS reflected in the higher level document, that Fonterra's facilities are regionally significant. And the relief sought is focused on avoiding reverse sensitivity effects, ensuring that there is sufficient transport network capacity that enables the efficient movement of milk and milk products, and prioritising the rural environment for productive rural land use over amenity considerations from rural residential or lifestyle block type developments. Next slide, please, Leah. So Fonterra supports this is in section 4, part A, section 4. Fonterra supports the general recognition of the dairy sector. However, the relief that we're seeking here is that the industry's economic and employment contribution should be more explicitly recognised and provided for throughout the document. As Suzanne pointed out, Fonterra is New Zealand's largest company. It is the single biggest export earner in this country, and we've always referred to the Waikato as the heart of New Zealand's dairy industry. And if we can't get that recognised, that's not appropriate in our view. So we really want that strong recognition in the future-proof document. So moving to part B, section 1, it's the point about it's a strategy, not a blueprint. And this is the point we made sort of last time around, is that future-proof appears to be predicated on a view that only government authorities, whether it's central, regional or local, undertake planning, along with specialist agencies such as Waka Kotahi. But the reality of it is that a lot of planning in terms of what occurs out there in the real world is done by private companies and individuals. And the whole history of the dairy industry in terms of its development, it hasn't been the cleverest planners in the world sitting around and going, well, let's provide for an industrial zone over here for Fonterra to develop a dairy factory. It's Fonterra establishing those sites and creating those sites of its own volition. You know, planners can't understand what's happening in the global dairy industry, what's happening in the boardroom of Fonterra, and where the centre of gravity is in terms of supply and production capacity requirements and product mix that's required. Those are the sort of things that only Fonterra can determine. And if you look at, go way back in history, all of the dairy factories that were established, they weren't established by councils going, oh yeah, let's put a dairy factory here. The more recent ones, Litchfield and Darfield, they were sites that were created by Fonterra by going out and by taking into account all those factors I've mentioned, and finding a site and creating it by taking it through a planning process. And what we want to do is to have future-proof, recognise that reality. You've got other examples. Sleepyhead is a good example. Now, I know there was a lot of tension and argument about that as an example, but it's symptomatic of the fact that there just is not the land identified and zoned and available for the likes of, and that's just one business, to come down from Auckland and to do what it wants to do in terms of establishing a great bit of economic activity for the region. My understanding from speaking with Sleepyhead is there are plenty of other businesses in the same boat that would love to come down here and set up shop. But where do they go? And if they do want to come down here, they've got to go through this unanticipated and out of sequence criteria, which is all set up for them to fail. So what we want is the future-proof strategy to be enabling. You know, it's not to say that inappropriate things should happen, but we want it to be truly enabling rather than restrictive. And that applies to Fonterra as well. Next patient, please. So Fonterra is also at the moment advancing a private plan change to rezone 71 hectares of land at Hautapu. We're doing so at the request of the Waipa District Council. That is to enable supply of industrial land. Later in the subsequent presentation, I'll give you an example of why that is. But we're having to go through that Appendix 13 hurdle, which is, essentially set up to fail. We have to undertake all sorts of intellectual gymnastics to try and, get through that process. And when I come to the end here, we'll talk about the maps. Because when you look at, for example, on that Part B, Section 1, so that quote there, ensure that adequate supply of future business land occurs in agreed locations to meet long-term need in a responsive and timely manner, only in areas agreed in the future-proof strategy. So if we're not already in there, we're in trouble.
Next slide. Sorry,
next slide.
Yeah.
Sorry, that one there, yeah. So if we're not already in the future-proof strategy at the front end, you're set up to fail. And that's difficult in terms, and that's very costly and troublesome for people trying to get proposals through. And even in this case, when we're within a recognised industrial growth cell in the district plan. So that's the conundrum we're facing right now, is having to navigate our way through that in a very costly manner. Moving to the next slide, please. So this is focusing on, so we recognise the need for flexibility, but it also needs to not turn fundamental planning principles on their head. So, one of which is the separation of incompatible land uses is one of the most fundamental principles of sound planning and resource management practice. And that's where we need strong policy at the high level and then flying through into the other documents to avoid reverse sensitivity effects. Because if you, as I said before, if you have policies that minimise, that only seek to minimise, you get things like Te Awa Lakes happening. So you've got there 1,100 residential units that were approved within 300 metres of the heaviest industrial site in Hamilton City. And it happened with the support of Future-Proof. And that, to me, is contrary to recognising that area as the biggest strategic industrial node in the Waikato. So you've got the Te Rapa North, which adjoins the Horatu strategic industrial nodes. And those are the sort of outcomes that we're trying to avoid through this planning process. So I've got the various other slides there that focus on the same theme, which is essentially to avoid reverse sensitivity. And I'll just jump to the last, or just because of time, we'll jump to the last one, which is the map. So if you go to the last slide, Leah, we've got an appeal on this, on Plan Change 1 to the RPS. You've got policies in the regional policy statement that talk about things being within or outside of a strategic industrial node. Now, that's all you've got to tell us as to what is a strategic industrial node, which is a round dot that in, what is it, grey? Hang on. Yes, grey. So the grey dots show you where the strategic industrial nodes are. Now, is my plan change, Fonterra's plan change at Hautapu within a strategic industrial node or not, looking at that map? No, even when you zoom in, there's not the ability to determine whether you're in or out, and the policies hang on whether you're in or out. So if I wanted to establish a retirement village in that strategic industrial node, I wouldn't know whether it was in or out. So we're seeking that sort of clarity as well, that these areas actually be mapped and identified very clearly with firm topographical references. Because that then flows down through into the RPS and into the district plans as well. That's probably enough. So we'll allow some time for questions soon.
Thanks, Mark. And we'll get all of the presentation circulated to members. So open for questions. David, you look poised for a question there.
I'm still making my question up.
Well, feel free to make it up as you go along, Mark.
Yeah, Mark. So I'll start with: is the solution to your issue that you've raised, to the issues you've raised, actually the strategic industrial nodes being better defined and being in appropriate locations, versus us trying to juggle the need for, on the one hand, avoiding mealy-mouthed policy that doesn't go far enough to provide certainty, and on the other hand, avoiding policy that provides certainty that you don't like? Because that's what I got from your submission. On the one hand, we don't like that you're allowing some potential for reverse sensitivity, and I get that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we don't like that you're being too certain in terms of putting a line around where we can and can't develop. We would like a buck each way is how that sounds.
Okay.
Is the solution to the buck each way actually, let's just be really damn clear and really clear at a very, very high level of detail where those industrial zones are and get them in the right place?
Yeah, that would go a very long way to addressing Fonterra's concerns, because if you know that I'm establishing or more realistically in this environment, if I'm doing an expansion, so I'm adding a cheese plant onto an existing dairy factory, or as we hoped to do in the past was put a railway line into Te Rapa. But you're not going to do that 300 metres away from a residential area because you load them up at night. So if you define where those areas are, and then you know that you're backed up with the policies like you've already got that say that only industrial activities in industrial areas, that then deals with a lot of that.
Deals with those issues. Because we had a submission that I think would benefit from the same thing just recently at Waitoa. So it's the same issues, not quite as acute, but yeah. Bye. Thank you. Cheers.
Just if I can follow on that theme, and David's provide the segue in terms of what we'd heard from Waitoa Industrial Limited in terms of, for example, the wet industries. So being much more specific in some locations. So Leah, can you go back to the quote that Mark provided in terms of page 80, that one? Because it talks about in a very generic manner on business land. So do I take it that perhaps future-proof strategy should be much more specific in some locations on what the nature of that business activity is. Now, I don't know whether that's taking us to picking winners or whatever, but becoming much more focused as opposed to just dealing with business land in a very generic manner.
So in terms of Fonterra's interests, I look at it from if it's identified as industrial, so business covers a multitude of systems from your corner dairy through to our dairy factory. Okay? So, but if you focus on like these are strategic industrial nodes, they're not strategic business nodes. So we're not having shopping centres and things like that.
Yeah.
The idea is that we are talking about industrial land. So, for example, that whole H2 area, that whole triangle of land between the old city boundary, the Waikato Expressway and the river, that triangle of land at the north end of the city, that was brought into the city on the basis of a written agreement between the various councils, and Fonterra heavily involved in that it would be used for industrial purposes. And since then it has been, and then we were involved in the district plan, it is then deferred industrial, and it was also identified as a strategic industrial node. And in the past, we were all very clear that all that industrial zone land was part of that strategic industrial node. And now that map that we're talking about is a regression from that position, because it's just the same size dot everywhere around, and you don't know what the boundaries are.
Yeah.
And so we have no certainty.
Just before I go to Sarah, final question. By implication, given your commentary around reverse sensitivity, are you suggesting that also the future-proof partnership should take a very keen interest in the fast-track legislation, because there is the potential for that legislation, and fine, it's going through its process, to actually give rise to reverse sensitivity issues? Because there'll be others, for example, wanting industry, there might be some wanting housing or whatever. So I'd just be interested in your views while you're here on that matter.
So if anything, that probably reinforces our view that you need strong policy. If you're serious about protecting industry, or if you'd rather it have to shut down and go elsewhere, and I've got lots of sad little planning stories about activities that, you all know about Bay Park Raceway and Western Springs and all sorts of other things that have had to shut down or have seriously curtailed operations because of reverse sensitivity. In Bay Park Raceway, residential was right up against, it was allowed to occur right up against it, and it had to relocate. And so if you're happy for industry to go to other districts where it's adequately provided for, or you genuinely want it here and you need to protect it. And that's where you need that strength of policy to say, look, let's identify these areas as strategic industrial nodes, have strong policy that we're not allowing sensitive land uses in those areas, and we're not allowing stuff to occur that is going to create reverse sensitivity effects.
Okay. Final question. We move to Mark's other submitters.
Yep.
But Bear, and given you're here till 12:30, if members have other questions, and if we have time, we can come
sure.
back.
Absolutely, I'm happy to
Sarah.
take questions.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just interested in terms of infrastructure. You mentioned H2, that area in particular. What infrastructure, what work has been done to identify the infrastructure required, and how do you envisage Fonterra then contributing to that infrastructure and us actually having certainty that there is that appropriate?
Yeah, sure, that's a good question. Fonterra typically self-services itself. So if you take Te Rapa Dairy Factory as an example, it takes its own water supply from the Waikato River. It has its own wastewater treatment plant. It has its own power station that generates electricity and exports to the grid. It developed the first, and I think still remains only, grade separated interchange to a private piece of land, country, to the extra mile. So it's done all of those things for itself to have what it needs. In terms, if your question is about the wider area, then there's a plan change process that Hamilton City, I think it was called Plan Change 10, that was being advanced, which I think has been placed on hold. But
Can I talk to
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
if I can
Yeah,
talk to
yeah,
that, thank you, Mark. Yeah, so absolutely, as Mark has said, the Fonterra expectation is that it is servicing itself in terms of the wider Te Rapa area. So there is a process underway at the moment to look at what is the use of that area, and we have had conversations with Hamilton City on that. So part of that conversation would be, are there opportunities to rezone industrial land in that space, and if so, what are the implications for the wider infrastructure? So we're very much on the front foot looking at what would be the traffic implications, what would be the Three Waters implications, looking to have those conversations with Hamilton City Council at the outset, because we're hearing obviously how do we then undertake that development in a way that doesn't compromise other areas being developed for that use. So we will be starting those conversations at the moment, and we have obviously technical people who would be informing that conversation to look at how do we develop this land and, you know, not create a burden for the wider city, but make sure that area can be serviced appropriately.
And thank you for that. How would we be able to ensure that there is a commitment, however, to that infrastructure? Because if the land is zoned, it could be zoned without that being put in place.
I think that's the conversation which is starting at the moment. So we're absolutely starting that conversation with Hamilton City at the moment to say, how do we start to work through these, you know, obviously challenging issues, and then how does that become part of the plan change process as we go ahead. So as I say, I think that's very much in the early days at the moment. And it's about how we work through those issues to create a positive land use for both Fonterra's activities and for the wider city, so that we can provide additional supply within the city for industrial development. Yeah.
And also to answer that question, there are already rules in the Hamilton City District Plan which restrict the volume of traffic that can utilise that grade separated interchange on the legs that go north. And so that is a constraint, because the expectation is that the land on the west would utilise that interchange as well. So it's always been, there's been lots of roading studies that have been done in the past that recognise the need to full lane. Fonterra owns the land that would facilitate that full laning. The pipes, there's already pipes in the ground. They might need to be upgraded. Fonterra's water supply also supplements the city at times, I understand. So there is the bones of infrastructure there that would need to be augmented in the context of any plan change that rezoned that land.
Thank you.
Liz, last question
Yeah.
in terms of this part.
Thank you. Look, and thank you for your submission. Obviously, Waipa has 2 dairy factories in its area, Suzanne, as you well know. Look, this is always a balancing act, and I guess, you know, Fonterra is in a very strong position to be able to fund a lot of its infrastructure, but not all of our industrial businesses are in that same space. I'm sure you're both well aware, councils, what they're facing at the moment in terms of a difficult, volatile space where we want to acknowledge business coming into our region, but we can't necessarily, just going back to Sarah's point, we can't necessarily put the infrastructure in the ground. We're just simply not in that position at the moment. So I just wanted to acknowledge Fonterra, that you generally put your hand up to do a lot of your own things, which is great, but not every business is in that position. So that's the balancing act that council is always forced to face, you know, and that when is the best time. So I acknowledge the map, acknowledge that we could probably do a little bit more work on that to try and safeguard industrial areas, but it comes at, you know, comes at a bit of a cost as well, you know, at times, and in particular, this volatile market conditions that we're currently facing. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
In your case, I mean, we're only really talking about Hautapu in terms of that strategic industrial node. All you need to do is, it's basically Peak Road through to Swain Road, Mangone Stream, okay, and Waikato Expressway. That's your boundaries of it. That's what's recognised in your district plan already. That's what we want to have recognised in Future Proof and the RPS. And in that regard, the land that is yet to be developed will all be developer funded, and including the land that Fonterra is rezoning at the moment. There's rules in the plan already about development agreements being required, and those rules will apply to this land as well. The sewerage is already there. The pump station has already been put in by Bardoe Investments. Water supply is already going in. There's a lot of roading that needs to be done, and that's all developer funded. So I think you're okay in terms of that Hautapu area, in terms of that funding issue.
Okay, we will end
Yep.
the Fonterra part of it now, but thank you, Suzanne. Mark's staying in the seat for other presentations. So, and Leah will at lunchtime send around the presentation to all members. Okay, so I'm in your hands, Mark, in terms now how you want to work through with your client presentations.
What time have we got till? Was it?
You've got in total to 12:30, so
just over an hour. Okay.
leave it to you to juggle that through.
Right. Okay. What I think we'll do at the start is basically just do a little round of introductions of the posse I've got here. So we'll just go around the room here. So I'll start with Mason. Mason Jackson. David Hill.
Tabby Tiger. Alistair Smith.
Welcome, guys.
Cool. Yeah, okay, so the way this is structured is to basically I'll just also outline sort of a little bit about each of the clients. Okay, so we go to the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so starting off, next one. Okay, so Puawai Estate, 76% New Zealand owned and 24% Australian owned development and investment group. It superseded a company called Western Developments that you might be familiar with. We submitted last time round on as Western Developments. And the company was gifted the name Puawai by Mana Whenua. It secured development interests in what's called the Rukahia block, comprising 960 acres, 60 hectares within the Waikato metro area. So that's the land to the west of the airport, the west of State Highway 3, east of the main trunk railway line. Big chunk of flat land, largely flat land out there. Right, Tabby Tiger is, so we've got Jeff and Paul here representing them. They own a block of land that's about 34 hectares on the eastern side of Airport Road, across the road from where Building Depot and Torpedo 7 are. I'll show you a map further on. And looking to rezone that land to airport business zone, but with a bespoke agri precinct overlay on that, which I'll talk about in more detail. Next slide is Honeycomb Development, sorry. It's a Waikato-based residential development company. It's seeking to subdivide or rezone and then subdivide a block of land at the very southern edge of Ohaupo. Into large lot residential, which is the same as what's immediately across the road, across the other side of Ryburn Road. And I'll talk to that in more detail. And then finally, NK and NC Limited, which is Alistair here. Owners, Alistair owns a very large dairy farm in just immediately south of Gordington on Piako Road there. And we are in the advanced stages of preparing a plan change for that land to be rezoned to enable a retirement village to be located on that land. And I'll talk about that in more detail. So moving to the common submission points. Right. So just noting here that and these are points that are so common to all four submitters, is ensuring that future-proof ensures that there is sufficient supply of land zoned, serviced and available to the market for residential industrial and or commercial purposes. While labour shortages are a factor which is recognised in the strategy, it's the lack of development opportunity, mostly in terms of the availability of land, that is preventing high-value industrial and or commercial activities from establishing and growing, let alone thriving, which is one of the things you're wanting to achieve. So I mentioned before about Sleepyhead as an example. It's the problem being is that the land is not available to the market to be able to actually develop. And if it's not recognised and future-proof, then it becomes very difficult. And I'll talk about this concept of plan enabled. Doesn't, you know, that's a term out of the NPS, but it doesn't do the job. And I'll give you some illustration of that a little bit later on. The next slide, please. So this is the point I made before about being a strategy, not a blueprint. That doesn't preclude you from clearly identifying strategic industrial nodes. So that's, yeah, so this is that same point as I made before about the reality of it is that it's not just, you know, planners sitting in government agencies that do planning. There's a lot of it is privately initiated. And we'll talk about an example around the airport where we actually want more council planning than is occurring at the moment. So it's not just saying this is something of the private sector trying to muscle in. It's actually, there is also a need for more, of course, in this case, local government planning. So the next slide is the same point I made before about the you have to be only in areas agreed in the future-proof strategy and needing it to be more enabling. So I'll just skip over that. We've covered that point. The next slide is the NPS UD implications. So yeah, so this is the same. This is an extension of the same point. As if we're not in future-proof, if we're not recognised at the front end, anyone that tries to do anything is going to be facing a real uphill battle in terms of getting things through the process. So we really want some softening of that. There's particularly the criteria in the Appendix 13 of the RPS ultimately, and that can feed from future-proof, sort of doing that in the first instance. So, for example, it doubles down on highly productive land. And so you've got this NPS, which is the bluntest instrument the planning industry has ever seen, no transitional provisions, and basically trying to solve a problem in Pukekohe, and has now created a whole lot of problems for everyone else. So all the land around Cambridge, for example, is all highly productive land. Where do you go? Because you're set up to fail in terms of that NPS. The Appendix 13 criteria double down on it. And that's one of the matters where it says that you can't do development. So again, we're having to do intellectual gymnastics to try and get things through that sort of need to happen. The roading and transport projects, at the moment, the future-proof strategy talks about what's anticipated as if it's a spectator. I strongly think there's a role here for future-proof as a powerhouse of regional and local government to send a message to central government, rather than just waiting and anticipating maybe one day Southern Links and Cambridge to Pairi will be built. Actually say in the strategy, we want it built, we'll promote it, that these are really important pieces of infrastructure for this sub-region, and take a strong position in here on that. I know previously it was the Mural Forum, I think, was really active in actually getting the whole idea that the government thought that the Waikato Expressway was going to stop at Cambridge. And then the Mural Forum got on board and said, no, it's got to go all the way to Pairi. And that's been great. It's been really successful. But there's a role here for future-proof to take up the cudgels of that sort of fight. The housing and business assessment. The reality is that all of the assessments that have been done in the past have been undercooked. They have underestimated the amount of land that has been required, and that's I'm focusing more on, well, it's both residential and particularly industrial. And it doesn't, so that the stated capacity does not accurately reflect what is available in the market. And so we're very hopeful that the one that Robert's been telling me about, the business one that's going to come out very soon, will take a bit more realistic sort of approach. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Leah. This is my poster child for having for sitting back and going, oh yep, we got plenty of plan enabled, no problem. We're job done, tick the box. What you see is that big swathe of green land in the middle of what is the Hautapu structure plan area and a strategic industrial node. That has been plan enabled for over a decade. The landowner is unwilling to release his land for industrial development. So it does not contribute one jot to the supply of industrial land. So to the extent that you count it and say, oh, great, we've done a great job, we've got this covered, that's not what the market is experiencing. That land is not available to the market despite being plan enabled for over a decade. So hence, Wayne Allen from Waipa District Council poking Fonterra in the back with a sharp stick saying, come on guys, come on, can you rezone your land please? And that's exactly what's happening. So now we're looking at the land to the east of the Bardowie Industrial Precinct. Again, that Bardowie Industrial Precinct was a case in point where APL looking round for a site to be able to consolidate its business and expand it on one site. At the moment, it's spread across 4 sites in North Tarapa, separated by arterial routes. They wanted to be on one comprehensive site. It did not exist. There was nowhere they could go, so they had to go and create their own site by way of a private plan change. This is what's happening all around the place, is that I've got lots of other clients. New Zealand Mushrooms want 10 hectares of land, preferably industrial zoned. Where do they go? Doesn't exist, so you have to go and create it. And then if you have to create it and it's not recognised and future-proof, you've got to. Okay, let's move on to the specifics of certain areas. So we'll talk about the airport precinct. So just as a general sort of observation, just pretty much every major or growing airport around the world is surrounded by light to medium industrial activities, particularly with a focus on freight and logistic operations. And that's because they're typically synergistic or compatible. And that is what's happening around Hamilton Airport at the moment. But that transition from rural to industrial and everything else that has happened around that airport has happened as a result of motivated companies and individuals doing their own thing and advancing private plan changes or non-complying activity resource consent applications. The whole airport precinct has been developed in a very ad hoc manner. There has never been any planning authority that has said, right, let's grip up on this and identify, right, what is the extent of that precinct? What should it look like? What's the infrastructure we need there? Wakakatahi is I'm told, is doing a development strategy of some kind in terms of the future of Airport Road, but in a total vacuum as to what the land use pattern is that it's supposedly servicing. We were doing things like the Tomra development. We made sure that there was enough land available for 4 laning through there, but we're doing the Tabby Tiger plan changes, which I'll talk about again. We'll make sure that there's enough room for 4 laning, but we're having to do that because no one else is doing that at the moment, as far as we can see. So it needs that, and we've submitted on Ahuaki, which is Waipa's spatial plan, and asked Waipa to grip up on this, and say, because it is in their district, and they are the logical agency to do this, and say, look, rather than everything still, even the most recent plan change, the airport plan change 20, it's just an ad hoc development being driven by the airport rather than the planning authorities going, right, where's the start and stop? You look at the whole eastern side of Airport Road, if you run down and look at all of the things down there, Tomra, go-kart track, Pistol Club, what was Powerbeat, now New Zealand Honey, a heavy machinery business, a sand quarry, now a landscape. It's all zoned rural, but it's not rural. It's not, the planning is way out of date in terms of that whole area. And this is where Puai comes into it as well in terms of looking at the opportunities of a whole lot of flat land to the west of the airport, access to the airport, access to the railway line, being able to establish large-scale industrial activities with access to a railway line. Where can you do that, and where you can own the land? Anywhere else. There's obviously Ruakura, but they don't want to have things like a plastics recycling factory in their area. So again, you have to go and create those sites. And we all happily put our rubbish out and our recycling and think, aren't we doing the right thing? Yes, lots of it's going to landfill because we don't have a facility. We came along and talked to you last time about this and said and told you that. And we want to have the ability to recycle that and turn it into useful stuff. But at the moment, there is no ability to do that because there's no land available for that. It needs to be adjacent to a railway line. So we're saying that there's a far more coordinated approach to the next slide. Yep, that's necessary for that airport precinct. And we're suggesting that a airport precinct development strategy be developed, which is led by Waipa, coordinated with Waka Kotahi, involves consultation with the relevant landowners, including my clients. It's got to ensure that the airport is able to operate effectively without reverse sensitivity, so it needs to have compatible land uses around it. And it needs to include looking at the whole infrastructure side of things as well, because that'll help with the funding of it as well. If we know we're providing for this sort of scale of development, we'll know what capacity it needs to be. The more you've got, more contributors to that there will be. Okay, so starting with Puai as the next one. So that plan shows the location of it to the west of the airport and to the bounded by the railway line to the west. And Puai is looking at developing a staged development of the Rukahia block to increase the region's stock of commercial and more particularly industrial, while consciously focusing on delivering a lot of heavy industrial opportunities. So the recycling plant is one of those opportunities. Stage 1 is completed, which is there's a sand quarry. There's a fifth leg that's been developed at the roundabout on Stataway 3. It's all been designed in a way that accommodates Southern links, and indeed in a manner which improves the economics of that by some slight adjustment, I think, to the design, which was agreed with Barry Dowsett way back. So that's, if we go to the next slide, please, there. So that shows the block, and basically, so you can see in there on the sort of southeastern corner is stage 1A, which is the sand quarry. Stage 2 is the plastics recycling plant at the back there. And yeah, because what happened last time around, I think it was, as Tony Quickfall said to us, it was a bit, the idea was too big. So we've taken more of a staged approach, but it needs to be, again, if you're going to do this and advance it by way of private plan change, it's very helpful to have some recognition and future proof, because as is always the first question, how does this fit into future proof? Well, if it's not future proof's idea, it doesn't. If it's someone else's idea, you're struggling from day one. So we want to get that recognised in there. So the next slide talks about the various stages that are proposed. So we've got the quarry is underway. It's operating. The roading access has been designed to accommodate the future development of that land as well. So looking at the recycling of plastics and utilising the rail siding. So it needs that to be, because it'll be a national facility. Stage 2 is the quarry expansion. Further stages will involve heavy industrial and light industrial and commercial activities to be best suited to this location. And there's significant scope for other potential offerings to deliver additional economic activity to support Hamilton Airport and leverage support for the accelerated construction of Southern Links. So if you've got a whole lot of industrial activities there, that'll help in terms of like happened with the Waikato Expressway as well. So it's strategically located next to Southern Links, Hamilton Airport and the railway line. It's, it aligns well with the spatial arrangement of other current and future residential commercial areas. So you've got just across the other side of Southern Links, you've got a large residential area in terms of Peacock's area. So there's your live, work and play sort of like, but still separated by the highway. So you've got your you've got your employment locally rather than everyone who builds a house on Peacocks having to drive through the city and go up north to get it to work or places like that. So it's got that sort of long-term vision. And it aligns well with other ports worldwide, so as to be confident of its success. So we would like that included. Our next slide is that future-proof. This is the relief sought, which is that the future-proof strategy recognises the Rukahia block as a future mixed area that can make a significant contribution to meet the sub-region's future demand for commercial and industrial land. That the future-proof strategy map number 6 is amended so that it identifies the Rukahia block as a future mixed-use area, and that the future-proof strategy maps 1 and 6 are also amended to show the full northern precinct of the airport. Now, none of this guarantees that it'll happen. Obviously, all of these things have to go through a detailed plan change process. But what we're asking for here is to get a little bit of a tailwind that helps us along the way rather than a very big headwind. That's what it essentially boils down to when we go through these processes. And headwinds cost money and time and angst. Tailwinds are nice. And we think, it's got the merit. You want to anything else, guys?
Yeah, I'm just going to. Yes, we will. Yep.
Okay. So any questions on that segment?
There is.
Yep.
Liz.
Mark. Absolutely acknowledge that a master plan in this area would be very helpful. You've got a good number of people who are waiting to kind of understand what their personal business plans might be for the next few years. Obviously, we need to address timing of Southern Links, which David's going to help us with, aren't you, David? But we also need to address water to the airport, because that is a significant issue, as you know. What is your timing around the recycling plant? Because that's kind of, I guess, level of detail I haven't seen before. So I'm keen to understand what you think, what your aspirations around timing for that is.
As soon as it's rezoned, there we go. There we go.
Piece of land that people won't be saying that you can't have that find anywhere where you want to do recycling.
And it's a dry industry too, so it's not it doesn't really require water.
Yeah. Okay. No, good. Thank you.
The other thing too, of course, bear in mind is that the precinct that I'm talking about also adjoins the Waikato River. In terms of when I show you the Tabby Tiger land, so there is potential there, sort of either subject to water allocation issues and things like that. Yep.
Just before we move off, Mark, in terms of the airport precinct development strategy that you outlined, are you suggesting that there should be clear reference in future proof around that and providing, for the want of a better word, some
I think that would be various clients, including Puawai and Tabby Tiger, have been involved in the Ahuaki process, and I was talking with Kirsty Downey earlier this week, about where that's at, and that to me is the perfect starting point, if you like, in terms of getting it recognised in the spatial plan. And the thing that I struggle with a lot of spatial plans is they don't have many plans in them. It's a bit like this issue with strategic industrial nodes. If you're preparing a spatial plan, you need to show pictures of the area you're talking about. And this is what needs to happen around the airport. And my view is that it is the precinct from the railway line through to the river, and Southern Links and Mystery Creek. It's that sort of that whole area there. And that's not to say that it's all going to be developed overnight, but that's the whole idea. You identify the extent of the precinct. You say, right, this is the future of that area over a 20, 30, 40-year period, whatever. And then you work out the staging of it. And then you can work out your infrastructure planning that goes along with that. Because what we're all doing at the moment is putting in, for example, packaged plants that do a great job in terms of treating sewage and dealing with that on site and things like that, but also trying to do it in a way that you can say, right, we can eliminate those packaged plants when a wastewater treatment plant comes on and all bolt into that. And as I said before, the more you've got in terms of critical mass, the more economic that is. And if you've got the master plan that says, right, here's the extent of the precinct and these are all the areas that will ultimately be bolted into it, you start to get the bones of a business case to say, well, this is what it should be in terms of its size or staging or whatever. And same with the state highway. At what point do we need a 4-lane airport road? At the moment, the planning is it's going to have 7 roundabouts on it. You add them up for the whole length of airport road, 7 roundabouts. So that doesn't sort of bode well in terms of fast arterial or anything like that. But that's obviously what Southern Links will do. But it's going to be a real key road in terms of servicing that whole airport precinct, and it will need to be 4-laned at some point. And it's when needs to be figured out relative to the scale of development.
Liz, did you have a further question?
Look, just a final thing. I mean, you've mentioned intellectual gymnastics a few times, so I'd just like to think that the Ahuaki spatial plan that is being developed for Waipa is going to address a lot of those concerns.
Yep.
But we'll be adopting that later this year, as you'll know. But that is just a starting point, and the idea is we just get a whole lot better at it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You see, the thing is, if you get recognition of future proof, and then you get recognition in Ahuaki, and then we advance a plan change, which is in accordance with those 2 high-level documents, we've got a nice big tailwind, and life's easy, and things get done, and they get done cost effectively. But if we're not recognised in those sort of types of high-level documents, as I say, we get the big headwind, and you'll have people focusing on single issues and saying, right, we're going to knock this out because of that one little issue, like the NPS for highly productive land.
Okay. David.
I'll ask this once, Mark, but it goes for all of the developments and things. You almost all of them. So you talked about Southern Links being an enabler. I guess the question in my mind is at the moment, we've just done the form and function review for Southern Links, and the kind of end conclusion, which perhaps wasn't as helpful as it might be, is we actually need to hold off on the State Highway 3 component of that to see what land use drivers arise that might drive the function. So we've got the horse and the cart, one way or the other. And then you've talked about the airport precinct, and I'm very sympathetic to the view you're taking there because I think you're on the money. But what form do you see? Because if you read the GPS at the moment and you read the roads of national significance, I hope you're making a submission.
I was talking to Don Good earlier this week about helping him prepare a submission.
The function and form of Southern Links is a 4-lane grade separated bypass. It is not a piece of network that will enable lots and lots of connections or development. And so, again, I come back to the buck each way kind of thing. I think it's really important that someone articulates very clearly what that expectation looks like for Southern Links, because frankly, a 4-lane grade separated expressway from State Highway 1 to State Highway 3 and then State Highway 3 crashing into the back of Greenwood Street is going to, in many respects, be quite counterproductive.
Yeah, okay. That's really important because this comes back to the genesis of future proof. Go back, there were 2 initial drivers, okay? It was that the NZTA was saying, we're about to spend a whole heap of money on roading. We want to be certain as to what the land use pattern is of that we operating within, so that we're spending the money in the right way, okay? And that was where Te Rapa bypass came out as one of the first things. The second driver was Hamilton City getting a bit concerned about stuff happening around its boundary, and sure it carries on, but yeah, but the whole idea was, and this is where I think Future Proof's been really successful, is that integration of land use planning and infrastructure. And that's exactly what needs to happen out there. So we're not looking at it as having a whole lot of industrial activities with direct access. We're looking at it and saying, well, there is, I mean, we haven't seen this review. It hasn't been made public as far as I know, in terms of the outcome of your full function review. I'd love to see it. But last time I saw it, it had a massive grade separated interchange on State Highway 3. Okay? That's your point of connectivity. You say, well, it's a bit like the Victoria Road intersection, grade separated interchange at Cambridge. So we've got a strategic industrial node with a whole lot of industrial activity there that gets access to the highway network via the best possible interchange. Okay, and I'm imagining that's exactly what we'll have there on State Highway 3. So you can go north. You can go north. You're not necessarily crashing through Greenwood, but you can certainly get onto the Waikato Expressway really efficiently from there by honking around the other way, going up the eastern side of the city. Yeah. Yeah, but we're also looking at the railway line. This is where the strategic benefit of the railway line is really important too. And think about that ultimately in terms of bringing the railway line into the airport. You know, Auckland's struggling with the whole idea at the moment, but I mean, we could easily do it. I'm not saying that it'll be economically viable straight off or anything like that, but you could imagine one day that could happen, and it's a hop, skip and a jump to get across a flat piece of land to get it there.
Go to Carolyn, but just we have 40 minutes left and you've still got 3 more to go through, Mark. So Carolyn.
I shall be very quick. Thank you for your submission. It occurs to me that rezoning is just one part of the puzzle, and we are all about giving consideration to growing communities as well. And when I reference that, I say social infrastructure obviously is important as well. In light of the timing you're saying is almost ready to go if it was rezoned, have you thought about the social infrastructure? I'm talking about your schools, your medical facilities, all of those, and how you're going to deliver on that?
Yep. Okay, so what we're talking about in terms of Pu'uai's interest is basically industrial employment areas, okay? Yeah. It's in juxtaposition to the whole Peacocks area, which is just literally across the road, okay? So it's anticipated that all of that sort of stuff that you're talking about would be within those areas there. There would be all those services. And as I said before, the idea being that we're creating an employment base close to a burgeoning residential area, whereas at the moment, if you just develop Peacocks and you say, well, where are all those people going to work? They're all going to have to jam in across, you know, it took me 50, I live in Cambridge, and it takes me 10 minutes to get to the city boundary. It took me 40 minutes to drive from the edge of town to the CBD this morning. 40 minutes. And basically, if all those people in Peacocks are all moving into the city or to points further north, they're going to be experiencing that as well, but on steroids. So if you've got employment that's more to the south, that whole airport precinct is identified as an employment node. You've got traffic going the other way. Hopefully, public transport as well.
So you're indicating complementary.
Yeah, it's complementary. Yeah, it's like you ask yourself, where, you know, Hamilton City's done a great job in terms of identifying future. Like most districts, like Waipa's done a great job too in terms of identifying all the residential growth cells around. But we've got to also have the employment opportunity as well. And as I said before, plan enabled doesn't do it. It's having to land where people are committed to actually developing it.
Okay, Sarah, last question on this one, because we've got 3 more submissions to hear from in the next 35 minutes.
Thank you. My first question actually can apply to both this and Tabby Tiger, and that is, what would be the intentions in regard to wastewater?
Okay, so initially packaged plants, which treat, these are the sort of things these days you can buy them off the shelf, and they treat wastewater to a very high standard, and then you either irrigate or drip feed them. I always tell a story about Brian's development at, have you ever been to Narrows Landing? Where, so you could be standing there in the garden at a wedding, the sewage literally being discharged around your ankles in the garden, these little wee drippers that just pop up, and it doesn't smell or anything like that. It's just, it was a very good packaged plant. It's developed for that facility. Just irrigates the garden areas beautifully. So, but the idea being that that's what we and that's the trouble is that's what we have to do now, because there is no public infrastructure, there isn't the critical mass, and there isn't the planning. There is a site, I understand, on Waiping Road or something that Hamilton City has bought, potential wastewater treatment plant. But all those activities could ultimately bolt into that. So it's a bit like the old days when everyone had a septic tank, and then suddenly, the sewage became available, so you bolted into that. It'll be the same around here.
Have you considered looking at directly contributing to the wastewater treatment plant instead of going straight to packaged plant solutions?
Yeah, that's absolutely an option if if the plant is available. But if we're looking at developing tomorrow or in the next 5 years, it's no benefit to be contributing to a plant that's not going to happen for another 20 years. So the plant needs to be there, and if it's not there, we're forced into doing a package plant. But the reality is you'll be paying rates for it anyway.
Internationally, it's well accepted now that package plants are superior to what councils and that can offer.
Okay, I don't want to have a debate about the quality of those right now. We'll leave for another period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
if it was a plant available. we'd
yeah,
be
so
using it.
our long-term plan has 2027 for construction to commence for the first stage of that. In terms of then, again, both of these developments, the Southern Links, the government has indicated very clearly that it's expecting value capture to pay for part of that infrastructure. So again, I'd like to understand what thinking you've done around how you contribute.
Yeah. Well, I guess having development adjacent to it that utilises it creates that value capture. I mean, that's the whole philosophy with the State Highway 1 corridor. In terms of you've got a plan about that, the idea is to leverage off that investment and get business activity. So you get all this business activity establishing. All the trucks pay road user charges in terms of when they're using the roads. They're all, you get more economic activity. There's more taxes being paid. That's how the contribution occurs. It's not we haven't thought about it from a point of view of saying, oh, we'll chip in some dollars to build Southern Links. It's through all those established indirect measures where taxation is already in place that funds those things, and half of what you put in your tank is paying for it as well.
Okay, so no thought to new tools that would assist with funding.
Well, Brian's already been liaising with Barry Dowsett over a long period of time. You want to talk about that too? Yeah.
I mean, in the bigger plan there, us funding western side of Southern Links wouldn't be an issue if we knew we had planning proceeding, so we can get it out of investors, which a lot of these are international investors. Certainty that that's going to happen. I mean, the other thing that really happens to land, and I've seen a lot around that airport, it all gets eroded. A lot of those titles, we only dealing with 4 landowners. This way, if they chop up their land, if they're entitled, a lot of them are in many titles. The ability to do this at scale is quite difficult, very difficult. Everybody wants things to say, we're not in my matching. Particularly with Southern Links, if there's a cohesion with timing and when it's large international concerns, it's saying where Hamilton Airport should be a freighter, fresh produce freighter. Do that. None of the plans that Hamilton City or the airport have provided are actually putting any of that stuff in place to where they could load planes, the logistics of that. Southern Links then would be modified to go down, upgrade, so planes could be loaded on other parts of land.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
do need to move on because I want to be fair to the other 3
Sure.
submissions.
Right, so Leah, can we move to the next slide, please, which should give us a plan? Yeah, right. Okay, so that is a plan showing the Tabby Tiger land. So it's a block of about 34 hectares on the eastern side of Airport Road, directly across the road from the building depot and Torpedo 7, bounded by the Waikato River to the east, Lochiel Road to the south. Everyone that. So it's got the genesis of the idea is already there. So BBC, which was taken over, which was Blueberry Country, taken over by Tomra, is the sort of the genesis of the idea. So Jeff was the CEO of those companies, and it was sold to a Norwegian company called Tomra. And basically, what that is a business that is research and development, a low level of manufacturing, and office sort of function as well. Now, there's nowhere that, so what we're proposing here is an agri-tech precinct. Okay, so it's leveraging off businesses like that, the fact that you've got field days right next door, in terms of being the sort of the premier agri-tech show and probably in the world. And the idea is that, you know, if I come to you and say, look, I've got a business like BBC or Tomra, or I've got a business which is developing automatic harvesting of broccoli or asparagus or something like that. What you need is you need a rural piece of land to be able to have the product grown so that you can test your machinery on it and do your research and development. You need that officey type function in terms of the guys that are actually designing stuff and then being able to go out into the field and test it. And then you need the prototype and the manufacturing side of things as well. And you need that all on the one site to be efficient. Okay, and that's exactly what Tomra is. And there's lots of businesses like that. And where do you go now? Because you can't do it in an industrial zone, because you're not going to pay industrial rates to start growing asparagus. You can't do it in a CBD office zone, because you've got a research and development thing, because you can't have manufacturing and you can't have the growing side of things. And so what we're doing is we're trying to fill a gap in the market here, which is what we're proposing to do is, just for the sake of consistency, is rezone it to airport business zone. So it's the same zoning as across the road, but it has this overlay which provides this agri-tech precinct. Now, we have discussed this with Waipa District Council. We've been given the green light to, yep, that's an idea that has merit. Go ahead in terms of doing a private plan change. But then we're going to come up against well, how's this fit in with future proof, guys? Well, it doesn't, because it's our idea. So again, we're going to have to go through that out of sequence or unanticipated development or out of sequence procedure, which the fact that it's not recognised in future proof means we have a problem. Big problem, Houston. And so that's what we want to be able to do, is get that recognition. And as I said, this is all part of that bigger picture that I'm talking about in terms of the airport precinct. I lodged a submission on behalf of Tabby Tiger in respect of Plan Change 20, and pointed out some of the things I've been talking about today, but the need for that comprehensive planning, the fact that that whole eastern side of Airport Road does not reflect the current rural zoning. As I've listed before, all those different types of activities, it's just, the reality is completely out of whack with what the district plan says this area is supposedly for. There is, the closest thing you get to a genuine rural activity out there is a horse training operation down by the corner by State Highway 3. The rest of there's 3 rural residential blocks in the middle, and the rest of it, as I've already outlined, is a bunch of recreational and industrial type activities already, pretty much. So that's, if we go to the next slide, please, Leah. So it's strategically located to the east of Hamilton Airport, and near to the Southern Links routes. The idea is to develop this agri-tech precinct. We requested a part of Plan Change 20, but then ran into a scope issue. But we are now advancing it by way of a private plan change. So next slide. It's that so what we're seeking in terms of the relief sought is that the future-proof strategy recognises the Tabby Tiger land interest as a logical extension of the airport business zone as a mixed-use commercial industrial area. That the strategy advance or at least promote the preparation of the airport development precinct, so what I was talking about before in terms of that whole area, and that incorporates agri-tech activities. And also, paramount in that airport precinct is obviously protecting the integrity of the operation of the airport. So we don't want to have anything incompatible establishing within there. We want to make sure that there's the ability for that to continue operating. So there's specific relief sought there in the submission in terms of map 6 and maps 1 and 6 in terms of identifying that as part of an area, so that we have our little tailwind when we are going through that plan change process.
Any questions in terms of Tabby Tiger proposition? Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mark. In terms of the agri-tech zone, could you please, you've partially addressed this, but could you please help me to understand the key differences between that and what we've got in Ruakura with Innovation Park?
Yeah, sure. That's quite easy to answer because Stephen Beach is one of my clients. So we do work for him at Innovation Park there. So when you go to Innovation Park, it's all effectively office-based type activities. There is Tetra Paks there, and there is a little dairy factory or something there as well. But basically, most of what you see there is lab type, or office type research and development and innovation type activities. It doesn't involve that component of, if we took, for example, we wouldn't be able to get Toma in there and say, look, we want to take up some of your land to be growing blueberries, or that we want to start manufacturing stuff. The Innovation Park was always intended to be an incubator. So you go in there, you do your research and development, you prove it, you then move out of there to expand it and create it into something massive. And what we're doing, so what this would be complementary to Innovation Park, because there's be a bunch of businesses in there that, having done their research and development, become successful, proven what they've developed, then need to go, right, we need to take this to the next phase. Now, where do you go? If it's an agri-tech type thing, where can you locate? The answer is nowhere. Because otherwise you're going to be fighting non-complying activity, consents, and there's no zone that provides for those activities in one location. Yeah. So okay. So take Tomra as one example, where BBC and Chef's family developed technology of trying to explain. You explain it. Yeah.
Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Okay, so the initial technology platform we developed was based around sorting and grading and packing of blueberries, based off our family blueberry farm. Over a period of 15 years, I built that business from a couple of people in a shed near Haupo to operating in 37 different countries, and I think about 60% global market share, the technology provided for the blueberry sector. That ability to connect with the growing and the development and the processing and packing all in one area allowed us and gave us a pretty unique skill set to develop world-class technology. And just as the extension of that same sort of philosophy where we can connect the growing, the biology, the plant husbandry, the post-harvest technology, the robotics, automation all into one place so that the teams can move faster. I think we've learned from other products. We've been playing with some broccoli harvesting as another sort of extension of some of the other investments in that space. When you can do these development cycles much quicker than having to stick a prototype on a rig and drive it to cacao, which we're doing today, we can get better design outcomes, we can get faster product delivery, and we also connect to the development cycle to the actual customer's experience, all of which provides a more valuable product, gives this opportunity for scale.
Okay, so essentially being close to the growers is, with this, is a key component of it.
You are the grower.
Yeah, we are the grower, and that is even the ability of doing so. So I think if fan engineers, when they actually have expertise growing and harvesting and picking, they do a better job.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions?
We'll move on to the next
On
one.
the next one, thanks.
Okay, so next slide, please, Leah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, let me just check. Yeah, we heard this morning from Waitoa, and they suggested a little bit of a change to one of our B9 directives. That the directive could refer to both productive uses and associated production activities. Would something along those similar lines sort of address what you're focusing on there?
At a general level, absolutely, that will be a good thing, but that's at a level of generality. That
Yeah.
Whereas here, the key solution is this airport precinct. You know, in terms of identifying that as a business sort of centre. I mean, if you do a word search on the word airport in the future-proof strategy, I think I found it once in the last page or something like that. So think about that in terms of how has future-proof gripped up on that airport precinct and actually recognise and provide for it. And it needs to be mapped. It needs to be in there, and that provides us the coat hanger to be able to then go, right, let's now take this to the next stage. Let's do a plan change. This is then seen in a bigger context rather than the continuation of the ad hoc stuff that's happening.
And this is a little bit tongue in cheek, Mark, but like the idea of the airport business zone with an agri-tech activity focus.
Yep.
How's the golf course going to fit into that?
It is entirely compatible in terms. It's separated by a gully for starters, so it's physically distant. It's not what we're talking about is not a noisy. If you go and look at Tomra, it's not a noisy, heavy industrial activity. To the extent that stuff's happening out in the fields, that's exactly like a rural zone. It's entirely compatible with the golf course. I don't think it's going to be. And the other thing too, of course, when you go, Claire, can we go back to that map? We have got fantastic. You can see that if you can look at it closely, there's actually.
So you think we can include it on the mapping? Okay, that was what I was getting at.
Protecting the. What's that? Yeah. Okay. Next one. Thanks, Jim. Okay, honeycomb. Right. Okay. So this one is a little bit smaller scale than some of the other things we've been talking about. So it's essentially, if you look at Ohaupo there, you've got most of it, what is developed as Ohaupo is on the western side of State Highway 3. There is quite an extensive area of land already recognised and identified for future growth of Ohaupo. But again, so what you're getting is a semi-plan enabled insofar as the future-proof level is concerned. And we're aware that down with that big green areas at the bottom left, there's a handful of 5 landowners that we're aware of with some very small blocks that are looking at developing the next phase of large lot residential, but the rest of them are not. So this is another one of those situations where colouring in the map and saying we've done the job is not actually delivering sections to the market. And there's just no movement in terms of those people doing anything about taking up this opportunity and providing supply. So whereas my client is immediately to the south of Ryburn Road, it's on class 4 land as opposed to higher class land on the other side of the road. It's a property that drops away from the highway down to the railway line. It has got stunning views across to Mount Pirongia. It gets access directly off Ryburn Road, which then goes to an existing intersection on the highway, which is on the outside of a bend, 70k zone with a right turn bay already in place, and we've already shut down a couple of the access points onto the highway. So, you know, we're in a sweet position in terms of access. Got the right soil class, got the views. We can deal with any reverse sensitivity issues in terms of the highway and the railway in terms of no complaint covenants. Not that they seem to be a problem for any of the existing development, which has got exactly the same phenomenon. And my client, and it is, when you look at it, it's absolutely capable of being developed for large lot. It's not actually a good piece of land to be running stock over, because all that is because of that slope, it's causing erosion and things like that. So at the end of the day, here's an opportunity to have something actually supplied to the market rather than just having the map coloured in and nothing actually happening. So my client is ready to go. We are at the front end of wanting to prepare a private plan change, so it'll have to pass all those tests. But again, if we can get a little bit of a tailwind from future proof, that is money in the bank, and that's what we're after here. I'm just going to tell you, so it'll provide approximately 41 lots. Yeah, and so basically in terms of the relief sought is that table 1 on the future-proof staging of growth areas be amended within Part B, Section 7 to include that area, that Map 6 be amended so that it basically provides for this as additional area. You're welcome to go and have a site visit. You can see it from the roads. It's a great location. It's just a logical extension of Ohaupo to the south, and it can be and would be delivered as opposed to stuff that's not being delivered.
Any questions? Liz?
Yeah, and my home patch, of course.
Yes.
Look, it's an easy. I'm really divided on this one. Actually, it's a tricky one. However, what we've seen in Hautapu, which you mentioned before, is we've still got someone, unwilling developers taking up space, waiting for the next flood, and we have a similar situation in Ohaupo. We desperately need Ohaupo to expand. It's a key town for Ahuaki in our spatial plan. We've identified it as a town that needs to grow. It's a great lifestyle for a lot of people. So my question is probably around wastewater. So through the private plan change, obviously that'll be addressed. It'd be a heck of a lot easier if we had a wastewater treatment plant in Ohaupo, but that's, we're not signalling that as a council at this stage. The cost obviously is not quite there. But overall, this is a town that wants to grow, needs to grow, and we've got unwilling developers in other spaces. So yeah, it does feel like a natural extension, and considering we've already had an extension just across the road anyway, but the whole large lot thing just feels a little bit, I'm a little bit uneasy about that, given that it'd be better if we could have a higher density. So perhaps that can be addressed some stage.
Sure. Yeah, can we go back to the plan, please? That's sort of music to my ears, Councillor, because that's what happened with St Kilda. We originally went in there and we're looking at rural residential. Wayne Allen said to us, this might be just a waste of good residential land. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So, and history tells you what happened. So we ended up with a blind residential scale development rather than rural residential. The reason why it's proposed as large lot, because that's the continuation of the pattern that's there, because the absence of wastewater treatment, and therefore it's an on lot sewage dealt with. So hence the lot sizes. If the council if there was some sort of ability to develop a package plant somewhere that created a higher density, I'm sure that Zia would be very happy to look at that. But first step is to get the line drawn on the plat, because obviously we're going to have to invest. My client's going to have to invest a lot of money. These plan change processes cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need to have multiple disciplines investigating 3 waters, archaeology, landscape, roading, you name it. They cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's not many of these processes that will happen for less than $500,000. Most of them are sort of more towards the $1 million sort of mark. And you don't want to do that if you're facing the headwind. It makes it difficult, makes it very risky.
Okay, I've got Sarah, then David, and then we'll move on to NK and NC Limited.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mark. In terms of wastewater, assuming the Southern Water wastewater treatment plant goes ahead starting 2027, then would it be a consideration to hook into that?
100%.
Thank you. And in terms of currently, what would be the price point of these large lot residential zones?
The price point.
Can you
Between
repeat
4
that?
and 5,
Thanks.
between 400 and 500,000.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And in terms of, you've mentioned a couple of times now the issue of land being zoned, potentially infrastructure serviced, but nothing's happening. So what kind, would your client be open to the idea of some kind of minimum yield agreement? Because so that we can have certainty that we're going to have a similar situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if that's going to a higher density, that's a great outcome. But obviously it needs to be coupled with a commitment. And if they have the ability to hook in 2027, then that's good.
Okay, thank you. Well, might take a while to build it.
Yeah, but yeah, true. I appreciate that.
David.
So my question is probably an observation that's probably quite predictable. You must have read my notes, but because I had 41 sections, right turn, actually not a big deal there. If you go down Liz's pathway of higher density, then you probably have to do a pretty reasonable intersection upgrade. But yeah, I mean, so be it. But just flagging that.
Yeah. I mean, you can see you get to the point where a roundabout would become an obvious sort of solution,
exactly.
there, and that enhances it being a village rather than a throughway. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to your final.
Thank you. I think we're doing okay in terms of time set. So we'll end up with NK and CK Limited. So so this is a proposed, we've got various names for it. We've got senior living environment, but let's just call it a retirement village because everyone understands what that means. So it's basically a proposed, Alistair owns a very large dairy farm that extends around the sort of southern aspects of Gordington. And this is, so the northern extent of that little picture you can see there is Piarco Road, which comes out onto State Highway 1B. So we're looking at using a relatively small portion of the farm to develop what would be about 180 180 unit retirement village. It's had a hell of a lot of work put into it. So we've had Isthmus do this big study in terms of layering, in terms of looking at all of the considerations. It's had, we're going through that whole we're in the final stages of a private plan or plan change preparation type process, but because the Waikato district plan is still a proposed plan, we have to, the way we can realistically do it is by way of variation. So we're talking to Jim, who's I think about Jim Evenhoe, about getting once he gets over a bit of a hump of the dealing with appeals, allowing us to go down the variation path. Now this is a proposal that it's effectively an expansion of Gordington to the south, which is recognised as a desirable thing in the Gordington blueprint. So we've been dealing with the local Gordington committee. They are supportive of this. We have been liaising. We've talked to the two local district councillors. They are supportive of this. We have been talking with iwi from Nui Marae, and they are very supportive of this as well. The property includes a pā site on it and an urupā. It was apparently and this is the piece of land between the stream and State Highway 1B. So we're talking, there's a whole lot of protective mechanisms that are going to go along with that. There will be public access to and along the stream. There's a wetlands around that area. They will be protected and enhanced. And so you see all those green areas, they're all wetlands, and then the retirement village, what they describe it as leveraging the edge. Okay, so it's up on a slightly higher plateau than where the wetlands are. So you're basically overlooking what will become a really beautiful sort of environment. That is an environment that currently has cows running over it, and it's grazed. So if you go through all of the key considerations to Whaimana, vision and strategy, big tick in terms of improvement in terms of water quality compared to the existing situation. NPS for fresh water, NPS for indigenous biodiversity, tick, 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 tick. No problem. Okay, you get through that. The only issue that faces is that highly productive land one. And if it weren't for that blunt instrument, and then we come back to, okay, we've attached to the submission an economic report prepared by Property Economics. And what that tells you is that, and this is the thing, so this comes back to your business housing, your residential assessment. In each case, it says, it goes through each district, and then it says a component of that increased demand is retirement living. But what Tim Heath tells me is that it's actually the majority of that demand is retirement living. And the situation you've got at the moment is that in the Waikato district, there are, as far as I'm aware, only 3 retirement villages in the rural areas. So that's a CC, Eventide and Tamaheri Country Club, all within a stone's throw of each other down at Tamaheri. Once Tamaheri Country Club is completed and fully built out and sold out, which is expected to occur in the next year or 3, there's nothing. There is no opportunity other than waiting for people to move out. Okay, so and it's not realistic to expect that everyone who wants to retire to a retirement village is going to move into an urban area and live in an urban environment. And so there needs to be some opportunities for diversity in the nature of supply to accommodate that. What Robert has very acutely identified as the bow wave that is already upon us. Because of our aging population structure. So we're talking here about 40,000 people. The demand is expected to grow by 40,000 people by 2053. That's a 104% increase, whereas the general population is only growing at 46. Demand for additional retirement units equates to around 7,000 units, more than the 2023 base year. So it's an average of nearly 350 per annum. Now, this one development would only supply about half of 1 year's supply at 180. So this is what we're proposing here is only scratching the surface. There is a big, big problem coming in terms of accommodating that demand and where is that supply going to be? Now, obviously there are opportunities within urban areas, but as I say, not everyone wants to live in town, and particularly people that are retiring from the country don't want to necessarily move into town. So this is an opportunity to provide for just what is effectively a little bit of that demand. As Alan Sampson said to us when we first approached the council about this, you can't do anything in the Waikato district without affecting high quality soils. In terms of where you want to do stuff, that's the reality of it. So yeah, and of course every person that moves into a facility like this frees up another house somewhere else. Okay, so that's quite an important thing in terms of actually meeting that demand for the next generation coming along. And there needs to be choice in terms of typology and location to better meet the market's preferences and personal needs. And there needs to be more affordable senior living dwellings, and additional supply increases that competition and improves housing affordability in the market. So if we end up with a tight supply situation, we end up with a high cost situation, and therefore constraining the opportunities through future proof and through subsequent district plans is only going to make that situation worse. And obviously something like this that's master planned is obviously going to result in an increased degree of amenity, and is going to be great. There's a whole lot of economic benefits obviously with it in terms of economic activity, decreased marginal infrastructure costs. We are looking at, so in terms of the questioning we've had to date, this will have a package plant. There is no wastewater facilities in Gordington. We're talking with the council about water supply, so that could be a potential upscale in terms of community level supply. And it will also be going to be great for the Gordington community, basically having this as effectively an expansion of the little township. So just the next slide. So there's not the opportunity at the moment. It's not being planned for. We're just only scratching the surface in terms of this one. There's very limited flexibility in terms of being able to do things on highly productive land. So that's the thing we get to, is we get a tick, tick, tick in terms of all of these regulatory documents. And then you come to the highly productive one land and it goes, oh, hang on, potentially got a problem here. So this is where, again, if future, all we really want is something in future proof that gives us a little bit of a coat hanger that says, yep, rural opportunities for retirement living is not off the table, that is something that can be considered and is anticipated to occur. Certainly occurred in the past. It's obviously very successful. You look at the speed at which Tamahere Country Club has been developed and filled up. And there's obviously, there's a lot of benefits here in terms of the whole the relationship with iwi and with their ancestral lands here, in terms of the past site, stream. There's a lot of archaeology on that western side of the stream, and so that's looking at being protected as part of this. Go to the next slide, Leah. I've got a couple of pretty pictures here. So this is sort of looking at this is an ecological restoration plan. So you can see, it's a bit hard to see on there, but there's the white outline is the sort of outline of the development, which sort of nestles around effectively the ecology. So you've got a large proportion of what is identified as the site is effectively being preserved for reserve type ecological and cultural heritage type purposes. And in my mind, and the next slide provides a bit of a cross section through that sort of stream environment as well. And that, to my mind, is providing a far more sustainable outcome, doing this in the right sort of place, than than saying, well, so you ask yourself the question, where else would you put a retirement village in the rural area? Being adjacent to a little community where you've got services and you can increase the economic viability of that, where you can create all these ecological benefits, is a really good outcome, and it'll be a beautiful environment. So what we're wanting in terms of the relief sought, on the last slide there, is that Future Proof recognises that a significant proportion of the sub-region's future housing demand is specifically for retirement living, and that there is a need, because there's at the moment it just says it's a component, but it's actually a very significant portion of that, and that there is a need to meet that demand both in urban and rural environments.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Your timing's very good. Yeah, David, did you Carolyn?
Thank you. I just draw reference again to your commentary around the blueprint, Gordington blueprint. Yep. So that's actually obviously a work that was done not so long ago, and I don't know that it was mentioned retirement plan as part of that, but I'm just wondering where you're drawing reference from in regard to that comment.
I haven't got the detail of it with me here, but at a high level, it does talk about expanding the boundaries of Gordington and to allow for growth.
Right. Okay.
It does, but it's not specific as to where that could be.
Right.
Okay.
So, and just when you're talking about timing of this, are you looking short, medium, long term?
We have been talking with Jim Evenhoe about getting a process, because if you imagine trying to advance this proposal as what would be a non-complying activity resource consent, but up against a whole lot of things other than the use for highly productive land. There's also other policies in the plan, talking about soils and highly productive land and things like that. And the fact that it's a rural zone means that trying to put a rural zone, my view as a planner, that's an inappropriate process. It's like you need to go through a plan change type process to do something radically different to what the zoning currently is. And I use the example of Te Awa Lakes. While I am pretty dark on that, that's an example of where there is no way you could get 1,100 residential units in an industrial zone. So what do? You have to change the zoning. You change the rules to suit yourself. And in that case, they managed to get that through, and then they have an enabling regime in place instead of a preventative regime. So at the moment, we have effectively a preventative regime with the rural zone in terms of this type of development. We are seeking to put in place, at the moment, our thinking is the settlement zone. It just fits squarely nicely within that, that zone provisions. We basically only have to change one rule, which is, there's actually two rules. One, because residential activities are provided for as a permitted activity, and that includes a retirement village. We don't think it's appropriate to ask council to say, make this a permitted activity through the plan change, because you're going to want some control over how that happens through a consent process. So the idea is to have it as a controlled activity application required, so we've got the certainty of being granted it, but that gives council control over all of the aspects of it in terms of servicing and bulk allocation and all that sort of thing. And there's another rule. There's a rule in there somewhere about number of residential units per lot. So this stays as one lot, but it's going to have 180 residential units per lot. So we just change those two rules, and the zone works perfectly. And add this new rule. And so that's the plan.
Yeah, thank you.
David, you've changed your mind.
I just sort of a question while Mark was talking, just in a general sense, if we were to say make provision for this and given the demand statistics that you're putting out there, we end up with, say, 10 of these things in our rural areas. What happens when Nana and Pop can't drive anymore and there's no public transport provision? Is it, do you think, responsible for us to be making provision for a land use development that we know is going to have, because it's inevitable, is going to have a transport implication, not just for those residents, but also for the wider ratepayers who are then going to go, well, suck it up, put a bus line into the service the rest home in Gordonton or Ohalpo or wherever the hell, because I mean it's a stretch to say Tamaheri Country Club is rural. So is Te Awa, if you take that view. They're not rural. They're right on State Highway 1. They're right next to public bus routes now. Gordonton is not.
So there's three things in there I've picked up. One, let's start with the zoning thing. When each of those three retirement villages at Tamaheri were developed, they were zoned rural. Zoning has caught up subsequently for at least one or two of them. That's just a minor point. In terms of the transportation issue, if you go to any of those retirement villages, they all provide transport for people to.
They don't, because my mother lives in one of them. So they don't.
Well, I'm constantly following the Tamaheri Eventide shuttle that's taking people into town. Well, maybe they should, but this is something that would be part of this. Is that there is transportation provided by the facility to do that, and that's usually not only shopping, that's health trips, that sort of type of thing.
Would you see that something that you would have in a plan change process, like a requirement?
If that was necessary, absolutely. It's one of those things where it's absolutely it can be. That's what I was going to say. Was that if you think about providing for that rural opportunity in terms of retirement living, it's actually from a transportation perspective, you want it to be within a certain radius of where those services are. And the reality is, this is one of the biggest hospitals in the Southern Hemisphere we've got here. You've got the shopping and things like that. So you don't want to necessarily. So, for example, if you compare the opportunity of, say, building one out in Aurene versus Gordington. Obviously, Gordington gets the tick from a transportation perspective, far closer to those sort of services, and if we can provide that transport, that's great.
It's 22 Ks.
Yeah.
Like,
And
just
the other
Googled
point
it.
you made is they're talking about having 10 of them. We're not proposing 10 of them.
No, but that rule, if we change that to provide generally for that type of activity,
Yeah.
given the demand that you said is out there,
Yeah.
that's 10.
So
So
they
it's not, we're
still-
not just talking about one.
Yeah, okay. So what it is getting the recognition that this is a legitimate form of offering in the market. I mean, history would tell you that by looking at where your mother is. And she obviously, presumably she likes that and has chosen that over, a far more urban environment of a Ryman in town here or something like that. So the offering is a legitimate offering. It's a legitimate market expectation. At the moment, Future Proof effectively forecloses that opportunity from here on in, because it's not provided for the out of sequence and the Appendix 13 criteria. Basically, you go through it, and as I say, we've got a big headwind versus a tailwind. So it's a case of, and it doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to have 10 of them pop up, because they have to go through a plan change type process to get in place, and that will determine the merits of them. But that's where that analysis should be. It should be at that level, rather than just a blanket no at the strategic future-proof level. That means, geez, we actually now need to do this, and we are struggling to do it.
Okay. Thank you. We do need to, that concludes this session. So thanks, Mark, and taking us through those, the range of submissions. I'd just like to acknowledge your clients, and also being able to provide the responses to some of those questions. I'd just like to caution, though, that whilst there may have been, and you may go away from here acknowledging that there were some supportive or encouraging comments, this is not the deliberations, it's the hearings. The deliberations are in early May, and that's when all the decisions will be made. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear that there's still a bit of process to go in terms of the formal consideration and determining all of the matters that have been submitted on. But otherwise, thanks very much, and also thanks for the responses in terms of the questions that members had had.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
On that note, we will adjourn for lunch. It's in the room through the door, double doors to the left. And I need you all back in, well, this is the members, back in here at 1:10 p.m. To hear from submitters for the afternoon session. Thank you. Hearing adjourned.